And last week, what we learned was we read through Psalm 73. It's by a guy named Asaph. He's a famous worship leader. And he basically said, man, like I'm up front and I'm saying, God is good, He's amazing, we give him praise. He said, but behind the scenes, I'm falling apart. And he showed us how he prayed. And it was really cool because the takeaway from last week was the best prayers are honest prayers. And so I've encouraged you all this week to pray honest prayers, to say honest things to God. Don't let your religion filter your prayers. Don't filter your prayers through your religion. Say what is true to God. Because, the crazy thing, he knows these things anyways. So that was last week. Now this week, I want to do something a little different. We're actually going to look at a story, a journal entry that was written by a legendary king who happened to be a ferocious warrior, and he was also a prolific poet. Now I think that's really cool, a guy who can absolutely tear you apart and then sit down and write a poem about it. It's a beautiful thing, right? And this guy's name is David. And it's really cool as you read through the book of Psalms because what you see is that he probably had one of the most honest and open relationships with God of anyone ever recorded in history. He was so blatantly honest about where he was in his journey. And so I, again, encourage you really get open your Bible and read through Psalms. I think it'll be helpful for you. But before we get into that, there's two words that I want to just talk a little bit about. Needs and seasons. Needs and seasons. So let's talk a little bit about needs. Here's what a need is, right? So a need, all right, now this is according to Wikipedia. Now I know Wikipedia isn't always the best place to go. It's not always the most, like if you're writing a scholastic paper and you quote Wikipedia, you may not get a great grade, but it's not a bad source to go to. And I really like what they said about needs, so let me just tell you what they said. They said a need is something that is necessary for an organism to live a healthy life. Is that fair? A need, I need this. If I don't have this, I will not live a healthy life. Right? Or at a minimum, at a maximum, I may die if I don't get this need. They said needs are distinguished from wants. So a need is, I need food. A want is, I want a little Debbie. Can I get a witness? Okay, so there's the need, and then there's the want. So they said, here's the difference, how to tell the difference between the two. If you don't get what you need, there will be a really bad outcome. It will be a dysfunction or a death. So if I don't get a little Debbie right now, like I'm not going to go into dysfunctional behavior, and I'm not going to die. But if I don't get food, after a while, I'm going to begin to get dysfunctional, and then ultimately I'll die. So the difference between a need and a want. So let me give you some examples. Some obvious needs. I'm hungry, so I need food. Little Debbie's, right? Okay. I'm lonely, so I need friendship, relationship, love, right? I'm cold, so I need heat, warmth. I'm broke, so I need a job, okay? But you see, like these are all needs, and if you don't have these needs met, it's pretty quick that dysfunction begins to take over, and things quickly it's obvious that it's not working because there's a need that's not met. Now, in my life, there are some obvious needs. I need God in my life. Without God, this quickly turns to dysfunction, and it's not long before there's death, right here. This primary need is God. Second need is the lovely and talented Mrs. Peterson. Without this girl in my life, everything begins to get dysfunctional. I mean, seriously, she's gone for the afternoon, and I call my wife, like, where are you? Mrs. Peterson is my wife. I call her, and I'm like, where are you? How long before you coming home? Right? Definitely need Mrs. Peterson in my life. I need my family, my girls, right? I need my church. I need this. Right? I need to see you guys, and I need to be prayed for by you, and I need you to hold me accountable, and we need one another to do this, right? I need my gym, right? So if we don't pay attention to the way we care for our bodies, guess what? You're going to get sick, and you're going to soon, dysfunction will take over, and you'll die, right? So you need your church, you need your gym, you need your family, you need your friends, right? And we say, yeah, we agree with all this. Now here's the truth. You will always have need of something and someone. Will you say this with me? I will always have need of something and someone. Here we go, ready? I will always have need of something and someone. Now, if you're in here and you're like, nah, that's not me. Okay, how's it feel to be an idiot, right? Because the truth is, like, you do need something. You need food. You need money. And you do need someone. You need a friend. You need someone to rebuke you. You need someone to encourage you. You need someone to be, right? So all of us, that wasn't very nice to call you an idiot. I'm sorry. We all need something and someone all the time. We have this constant need. Now, here's the thing about needs. Needs they change based on the season in which you find yourself. right? So what you needed yesterday may not be what you need tomorrow. So let's talk about seasons for just a little bit. In the summer, right, I need shorts and sandals, right? That's a need that comes with that season. In the winter, if you're in South Carolina, I know it's shorts and sandals. But if you're in like New York, right, if you're in the winter in New York, what do you need? You need boots, and you need a parka, and you need like those mittens, and like your needs change based on the season. Fair enough? So when my kids are young, I need more diapers. That was beautiful. That's right. I need more sleep, right? When my kids are young, like we never get enough sleep when our kids are young. And then they get a little older, and we need more money, right? Yeah, and patience too. I mean, it's crazy. So our needs change based on the season in which we find ourselves. One more example. When I'm hungry, I need food. Like it's a season of hungry, so I need food. Little Debbie's would be great right now, wouldn't they? But when I'm full, I need exercise or a nap. So like again, the season that you're in determines the needs that you have. Does that make sense? Okay. So, I mean, as I'm thinking through this, I'm like, seasons change all the time, right? Whether it's, literal seasons, winter, summer, fall, spring, they change all the time. Sometimes it's seasons of life. There's seasons of young kids and older kids and then no kids. Maybe it's seasons of work where you're employed and maybe then you're unemployed and then maybe you're the employer. There's always these changing seasons in our life. Now, for some people, this continual changing of seasons and this continual changing of needs is a cause for fear. So, for instance, look at this. What if who I need goes away, right? Like this girl that's in my life, what if she goes away? What if this guy who's in my life, he goes away? I mean, it could be anything. It could be divorce, God forbid, but it could be that. It could be a relocation. Maybe she has to move. Maybe he has to move. Well, I mean, it could be a death. And all of a sudden, this person that you need is gone. Now, some of you have actually experienced that, and you know what I'm talking about. There's some fear that comes with that change. This need is unmet, and now I'm scared. Or what if what I need runs out? I mean, what if like I need more money, but what happens if I lose my job or the economy crashes and now I don't have what I need to live? What happens if I run out? Like literally, this happened to me the other day. It was a disaster. I went to the store to get crimpets and they didn't have any. That was bad, right? No crimpets. What if what I need runs out? I'm going to have to jog after this sermon. All this junk I'm talking about is crazy. All right. But here's another question people wrestle with. What will I do when this season changes? Like in our home, we're getting ready to introduce our last child to kindergarten next year, and we're already talking about, like, what's it going to be like? We're going to go a whole day with no kids in the house. We've already talked about plan B. Okay, I'm kidding. If you don't know, we have 6 kids, so there's no plan B. But, like what happens when the season changes? What happens when all of our kids grow up and go to college? What happens when we realize our time in this location is done? It's time to like Mikey de la Cruz. We shared with you a couple weeks ago. God has called his family to Arizona. They're moving to a whole new place, right? And so this idea of changing seasons and changing needs, it can generate a spirit of fear. It can make us a little bit afraid. So a couple years ago, I was at a conference, and John Maxwell was the speaker. Anybody know who John Maxwell is? Love this guy. Incredible speaker, incredible teacher. And he said something that stuck with me. This is what he said. He said, experience is not the best teacher. Don't read the next line, all right? Because this is what everybody says. They're like, oh, experience, that's the best teacher. Experience is the best teacher. He said, no, it's not. Experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. I mean, think about it. There's lots of people that do the same thing over and over and over and over and over, and nothing ever changes. They've had a lot of experiences in a row, but nothing got different. Right? They get a paycheck every Friday. They spend all of their paycheck on Saturday and they're broke on Monday, and they do it every single week. They've had a lot of experiences, but they've learned nothing from it. There's lots of people who have relational disaster after relational disaster after relational disaster. They have a long string of experiences, but they've learned nothing from them. We call these people addicts, right? They do the same thing over and over and over and over and never learn. It's not that they've had a shortage of experiences. It's just that they've never sat down and taken the time to evaluate and say, what have I learned from the experiences that I've had? Maxwell says, and I think he's right, experience is not the best teacher. Evaluated experience is the best teacher. Now, I think we actually reach a point in our life where you've had a diversity of experiences. And I think, honestly, this can happen fairly young in our lives. We've had enough experiences to make some mature and thoughtful comments about our own lives. If we'll sit down and we'll take the time and we'll give the energy to genuinely thinking about our lives and asking this, as we look over our experiences, what have I learned? As I look at how I've lived life in this period of time that I've lived, what have I learned? Am I better because of my experiences? Am I in the same place? Am I worse? And genuinely giving thought and time to evaluating our experiences. Now, here's what I'll bet. And I would encourage everyone to do that. In fact, I would encourage you, to even take some time this week to carve out a couple of hours and sit down and evaluate your experiences. And as you evaluate your life, I'll bet you $1 that you will see that you've gone through different seasons. There have been ups and there have been downs. There have been seasons where you were winning and you couldn't stop winning, and then there were seasons where you were losing and you couldn't stop losing, and then there were some seasons where it was just pretty cool, pretty calm. You look at your life, and I think we'll all agree, like we've all had seasons, and with those seasons, we had a different set of needs. Fair enough? Okay. So let's talk about David. He was, again, a famous king, legendary king. He was a ferocious warrior, wrote a ton of poems, and he had a lot of experiences. I mean, he had some huge wins. Like, he had some wins that were so big, he would undoubtedly be on the cover of Fortune magazine. He nailed it. He was an incredible leader, crushed it. But then he had some experiences that were so salacious that he would have been on the cover of the Inquirer magazine. You know that crap that you read while you're standing at Harris Teeter waiting to check out? You know what those are? He would have been on the cover of those, right? Disastrous. Huge highs, huge lows, and he took time to evaluate his experiences. And he actually wrote down a lot of what he noted about as he evaluated his experiences. And a lot of them ended up in our Bible, in the book of Psalms. One of the most famous Psalms is Psalm 23, right? The 23rd Psalm. And in this Psalm, David actually evaluates his life, and he looks at the various seasons and needs that he's had in his life up to this point. And this is how it starts, right? David said, I'm looking at all my life, I'm looking at the various seasons, and I'm looking at the various needs in my life. And this is how he starts. The Lord is my shepherd. Say it with me. I have all that I need. He sits down, he says, look, I'm going to evaluate my life. And he looks at it, he studies it, and he starts to write, and he's like, wow, this is my conclusion. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need in every season, for every need. I have all that I need. Everything is. Now, when I read these words, I'm like, man, that's pretty incredible. Again, keep in mind, this is a guy who's had extreme highs, extreme lows, all kinds of experiences. He's a leader of a nation, right? He's a passionate worshiper of God. He's been in war. He's had affairs. He's raised kids. He's been a good dad. He's been a bad dad. He's had lots of money. He's been broke. He's been an outlaw. He's been the lawmaker. He's had all these experiences, and he says, here's my evaluation. Because God is who he is, I have all that I need. As I read that, one word jumps out to me. This guy had a heart that was filled with confidence. He was confident. Essentially, he was like, I can take on whatever life brings me because I have God on my side. Tremendous amount of confidence. Now, what I wanted to do is I wanted to just read through the rest of the psalm together and just see where David's confidence in some of his experiences. This is what he said. He, speaking of God, lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. Now, some of you, as we read through these, you're going to be like, this is where I'm at right now. This is what God's doing for me right now. Right now, I'm in a place of rest. My heart feels good. Spiritually, I'm engaged. Financially, things are well. My relationships are good. This is a good place. Some of you are going to say, that's where I want to be, right? Some of you are going to say, I just came out of that now, right? He lets me rest in green meadows. He leads me beside peaceful streams. And then he says this. He renews my strength. He guides me along right paths, and he brings honor to his name. He brings me new strength, right? I hope that for some of you in this room this morning, that God gives you new strength. And then he says, even when I walk through the darkest valley, this is what I love about David. It's not all, everything's good, everything's good, everything's good. He's like, no. Sometimes there are really dark places. Sometimes there's really dark places. Even when you're passionately committed to Jesus, even when you're fully following God, there will still be dark places. He said, my experience is, though, I won't be afraid because I've learned you are beside me. Your rod and your staff, they protect me and comfort me. You prepare a feast for me in the presence of my enemies. In other words, I win. When everybody's coming up against me, my experience has been when you're on my side, I win. You honor me by anointing my head with oil. My cup overflows with blessing. And his final conclusion was this: surely your goodness and unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in the house of the Lord forever. I love this because as David, behind the scenes, began to evaluate his life, he looked at all the seasons, he looked at the various needs that he'd had, and he saw something. God is always here. And so one sentence I would love to just give you today, and I hope that we can tattoo it on the back of your eyelids, is this: in every season and for every need, God is here. Would you just say this with me? In every season and for every need, God is here. Now, some of you are up here, and you're like, yeah, I know. God's definitely, he's engaged. He's like wide open, redlining in my life. I know he's here. Others of you are like, I'm in the darkest place in my life. It feels like God hasn't showed up in ever. David said, my evaluation of all my experiences was that in every season and for every need, God is here. And I'll just shoot straight with you, like as I stop and evaluate my own experiences, it looks like that for me. Definitely been moments where like, wow, God is alive, and it's like he's almost sitting across the table from me. And then there have been other seasons where it's like we were playing hide and seek and God forgot to seek. You've had those seasons? Right? I mean, there are seasons where he's so engaged, and then there are seasons where he's not. But my experience has been, as I look back over the time, that he does keep showing up, and he does keep pulling me along, and he does keep guiding, and he takes me from point A to point B. Sometimes it feels like he's not engaged, but I bet there's a lot of you in this room that could testify to the same thing. As you look back over the story of your life, you have to admit God has been here, engaged. I mean, I just looked through David's journal entry, and I see several different seasons in his life, right? He said there was a season of rest, a season of prosperity, a season of peace, a season of learning, a season of war, a season of death. And right now in this room, I would guarantee, and this, by the way, is why the church needs one another, and it's why we need to be in life groups, right? Because we can encourage one another, because some of you right now are in a season of peace. Things are well. Others of you are in a season of war. Things are being bombarded. Some of you are in a season of prosperity, and others of you are in a season of failure. And this is why the church comes together, and we love one another, and we encourage one another, and we pray for one another, and we support one another. David said, in all these seasons, I've been through them all, and yet I found God is here. The Lord is my shepherd. I have all that I need, regardless of what season. David said, look, it's just reading through the psalm. David said, God lets me rest. He leads me. He renews me. He guides me. He's close beside me. He protects me. He comforts me. He celebrates my wins over my enemies. He honors me. He pursues me. He's there when I'm resting, when I'm learning, when I'm scared, when I'm fighting, when I'm winning, when I'm worshiping. My mature estimation of my life, my mature evaluation of my life is this: in every season and for every need, God is here. And that makes me tremendously confident. And as we're reading through these Psalms together, my huge prayer for every single one of you is that as you read through these and as you open up your heart and your life to God, that you will begin to experience His presence in your life. And that you will begin to make decisions based on confidence, not on fear. Because decisions made on fear will end up taking you backwards and will deny you all of the good that God has for you. But that you will realize what is true. David realized it, and it's true, that God is here, and allow that to bring you confidence. David finally said this. He said, look, as I look back over everything, seasons have changed, needs have changed, but God didn't change ever. And his final evaluation, his final entry in this journal was this: surely God, definitely God, your goodness and your unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life. So no matter where I am, when I turn around, there you are. When I turn around, there you are. When I'm doing really good and I'm winning and I turn around, there you are. When I'm doing really bad and I'm making a ton of stupid decisions, I turn around and there you are. Your love, your goodness will pursue me all the days of my life. Not just the days I'm doing good, and some of you need to hear this. Not just the days when you're doing good, but all the days. Can you say it with me? All the days of my life. That's where God is. Always engaged. Whatever season I'm in, whatever need I may have, God is here. So David started this whole thing out by saying, the Lord is my shepherd. I'm not a sheep, so it's hard for me to connect to that. David was a shepherd, so it was an easy connection for him to make. I may have touched a sheep at the zoo, a very controlled environment, right? So I have no real, that doesn't help me. The Lord is my shepherd. The Lord is my personal trainer. That would work, right? I could get that. The Lord is my wife. I mean that seriously. Like, Sherry comes alongside me and helps me and encourages me. Like, that's a metaphor that I could understand, right? But the Lord is my shepherd. I don't get that. So, do you get it? Okay. So I Googled. I know, Wikipedia and Google in one sermon. This is ridiculous, isn't it? So I Googled. I was like, all right, let's see. Let's get some pictures here. First picture, look at this. Those are some sheep in some crazy places, aren't they? Like, I look at this and I'm like, wow, well, that's not a good place for these sheep to be, right? There's a lot of cars there, and they're laying on stones and bricks, and there's a guy standing there. I don't even know what he's doing, right? It's just a crazy place. It doesn't look like a great place, and then all of a sudden, you know what occurs to me? Sometimes that feels like life, doesn't it? Like, sometimes it just feels like, Lord, you're my shepherd, but you've led me to a crappy place. Right? But when I look at these sheep, I see a few things. I see, number one, I see that they're marked. Do you see that big red mark on their backs? So wherever they go, the shepherd will be like, hey, those are my sheep. Those are my sheep. They may be laying on bricks, but they're my sheep. You know what else I saw? I saw they had some food, and I saw they had some water, right? And then you know what else I saw? I saw that they're safe. They're really close to danger, but they're actually safe. They're not like dodging cars. They're not laying in the road. They're actually, the shepherd, I don't know why he has them there, but they have everything they need right there, don't they? And I look at this and I'm like, you know what? That feels like me sometimes. I feel like sometimes, God, this is not a good place. I would much rather be in another place. Why are we here? And then I realize I have everything I need. And some of you in this room are there. And can I just say to you, if David's experience was true, and if the experience of millions of others is true, would you just look to God and say, this is not my favorite place, but I realize I have everything I need? So then I did some more image searching here, and I found this picture, which I like a lot more. I like that. That's fun. Those happy little lambs jumping around, the dude in a plaid shirt. That's a good place because that's fun. That's safe. You can run around. You're not going to get hit. You're not laying on stones. There's soft grass. There's a nice house in the background. You probably go up on the deck and get some treats or something, all kinds of good stuff. That's a good place, right? And I looked at this, all of a sudden I realized, what's true in that first picture is also true in this picture. In other words, these sheep are also marked. Each one of these is marked. If you look closely, you can see they're marked. The rancher knows, hey, those are my sheep, right? The shepherd knows. Each one of these sheep has food and water. If you can see right there, the rancher's actually feeding them. And each one of these sheep is safe. This says a lot about what shepherds do. They keep their sheep safe. They provide for them. They protect them. And as David reflected on his life, he said, look, the Lord is my shepherd. I have everything I need. It may not always be the best place, but it's what I need. I'll be okay. I may not have a plate filled with Little Debbie's, but I might have beans and rice. It'll be okay. It's what I need for this season. And his ultimate reflection was this. In every season and for every need, God is here. And that breeds confidence. I can do this life. I can handle what it brings with me. I can handle what it tosses on my plate because God is here. So, I got to go down and get a book. I forgot it. Thank you. See? Like God, right there. Just give me my book. So, this is a guy named Francis Collins. Anybody know who Francis Collins is? Brilliant, brilliant guy. He's actually the current head of the National Institutes of Health. He was the director of the Human Genome Project, which is like one of the largest scientific breakthroughs ever. In fact, does anybody know who Richard Dawkins is? Like Richard Dawkins he has been called by some like an atheist or a militant atheist, right? He's an aggressive atheist. I've actually watched him make speeches in which he's said that people should mock religious people publicly. Like he's that aggressively anti-religion across the board. It's not just Christians, it's all faiths. Like he's a scientist, he's a very brilliant man, he's written a lot, and he dismisses and ridicules all believers, except this guy. Richard Dawkins says there's one Christian scientist that I actually take seriously. It's Francis Collins. Interesting. So Francis Collins, turns out, began his journey as an unbeliever. He was not raised in a Christian home. He was actually an agnostic, which basically means he was like, I don't know if God exists. I'm not sure I care if God exists. He doesn't make that big of a difference in my life. And then he started going to school, and the more educated he got, and the more he studied, this is what he says in his book. He said, I gradually shifted from agnosticism to atheism. In other words, I was all about this. There is no God, period. There is definitely not a God, all right? He said, I felt quite comfortable challenging the spiritual beliefs of anyone who mentioned them in my presence. In other words, if you said, well, I believe there's a God, he's like, yeah, and he'd get up on you. He's a really smart guy. And then he said, I discounted such perspectives as sentimentality and outmoded superstition. In other words, I'm the smartest guy in the room. And he was. He's a brilliant guy, right? And he said, if you believe in God, I think you're an idiot, and I'll argue you to the ground. But something kind of crazy happened. He went to medical school, and he actually studied at the University of North Carolina to become a medical doctor. He has a PhD from Harvard, and he's a medical doctor as well. And during his tenure in his internship as a medical doctor, he was assigned to care for dying patients. And his encounter with these dying patients was a game changer for him, because they knew and they experienced something that was foreign to him. And let me just read to you how he described it here. He says, I found that the relationships that developed with the sick and dying patients, it was almost overwhelming. And I struggled to maintain the professional distance and lack of emotional involvement that many of my teachers advocated. In other words, I'm in their life. It's hard for me to just disconnect and go home. And some of you who've worked in these environments understand when you're so close to these people, like you begin to get engaged at a deeper level than just professional. He said, what struck me profoundly about my bedside conversations with these good North Carolina people was the spiritual aspect of what many of them were going through. I witnessed numerous cases of individuals whose faith provided them with a strong reassurance of ultimate peace. In other words, as they looked back over their life, they too, like David concluded, whatever season I'm in and whatever my need is, God is here. He said, I begin to see this. They had peace, whether it be in this world or the next, despite terrible suffering that in most instances they had done nothing to bring on themselves. In other words, these are people who are suffering, and most of the time it was bad suffering, and it wasn't because they had done anything wrong. He said, if faith was a psychological crutch, I concluded it must be a very powerful one. If it was nothing more than a veneer of cultural tradition, why were these people not shaking their fists at God and demanding that their friends and family stop all this talk about a loving and benevolent supernatural power? In other words, he said, I'm encountering these people who are staring the worst. They're going through the dark valley. They're going through the valley of the shadow of death, and yet they have peace, and yet they're calm. He said, I couldn't explain that. My most awkward moment came when an older woman, suffering daily from severe, untreatable angina, asked me what I believed. It was a fair question. We had discussed many other important issues of life and death, and she had shared her own strong Christian beliefs with me. I felt my face flush as I stammered out the words, I'm not really sure. Her obvious surprise brought into sharp relief a predicament that I had been running away from for nearly all of my 26 years. I had never really seriously considered the evidence for and against belief. See, as Dr. Collins encountered all these people who were walking through the dark valley, people like you and me and people like we've known, people like David, they knew something that Dr. Collins did not yet know, and that was this: in every season and for every need, God is here. And it turns out that their confidence in God and that unwavering faith was a turning point for Francis Collins, who ultimately became a Christian and now articulately explains and defends faith in the world of science. Amazing, amazing, amazing scholar. But it all started with some Christians who knew and believed what David had discovered as he evaluated his life. In every season, for every need, God is here. So the band is going to come up, and we're going to actually do something this morning. They're going to lead us in a time of quiet reflection. And here's the thing, I know this happens because we do it, right? We have these conversations in this environment, and then we begin to think, and then we run out, and it's this mad dash to beat the Baptist to Moe's, right? I just want to get there first. I don't want to wait in the line. I know I do it. And so sometimes I just want to beat you to Moe's. I mean, that's the truth. But sometimes in these moments, we have these incredible conversations that we don't take the time to actually contemplate and think. And so this morning, for the next 5 or so minutes, I just want us to really just block everything else out. And let me just ask you a couple questions, and you process these in your heart. What season of life are you in? Is it a season of rest? Is it a season of prosperity? Is it a season of death? Is something dying? Is a relationship dying? Is it a season of well-being? Is it a season of discouragement? A season of winning? A season of failure? What needs do you have in this season? Do you need a cheerleader? Do you need someone to encourage you? Do you need someone to guide you? Do you need someone to comfort you? Do you need someone to protect you? Do you need someone to provide for you? See, David said, my experience with God has been that He does those things for me in those various seasons of life. Are you scared? That who you need may go away, that what you need may run out? Are you confident? I mean, some of you right now in this room might actually feel like the sheep on the street, right? This is not a good place to be. And some of you might feel like the sheep in the pasture. This is the best it's ever been. Some of you might be like Dr. Collins. I'm not sure if there is a God, or I'm pretty sure there's not a God. All I would say to you is that there are a lot of people in this room, and there are millions of people around the world, even today, who have found that their faith in this God is well-grounded, and that He shows up in all of our seasons of life. Some of you might be like the dying patients. The song we're going to sing says these words: it doesn't matter what I feel. It doesn't matter what I see. My hope will always be in your promises to me. I'm going to cast out all my fear because your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. We're going to give you an opportunity right now to just think about your season and think about your needs. I encourage you to pray to God. Even if you don't aggressively and openly believe in Him, I just say, why not give it a shout? Why not give it a shot? Throw something up, right? God, if you're there, right? It seems like you've been gone a long time. Would you step out of the shadows, God, and meet me right now in this season? Would you comfort me? Would you encourage me? Would you guide me? Would you forgive me? Would you give me a high five? Would you affirm me? Would you give me wisdom? Would you give me courage? David's experience was this: in every season and for every need, God is here. And Father, as I listen to David's journal entry, and as I've heard the stories of lots and lots of people who've put their faith in you, there's a consistency, and that is this: when I trust in God, He shows up, and He takes me places that are good. He meets my needs. It's a good thing to be under His care. God, David's final words to us were simply this: definitely your goodness and your unfailing love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will live in your presence forever. God, step out of the shadows this morning, I ask you, and reveal yourself to people, men, women in this room, in whatever season of life they may be, in whatever need they may find themselves of. Reveal yourself as a good God. And change hearts this morning and lives this morning as they invite you, Lord, to step into their lives. In Jesus' name.